Welcome to the Dom Sub Devotion Podcast. Today's episode, Don and I share about our dominant-submissive dynamic and how it is impacted by the nomadic lifestyle that we live. We live half of our year on the road, traveling from place to place. And in this episode, we share about how that's impacted us in our relationship, our marriage, how we've related to our own belongings and things, and the minimalistic lifestyle that's required when you live on the road. And in this episode, as you can see over my shoulder, we recorded this episode in a thunderstorm. So this did impact the audio quality a bit at times during this episode, but the content and the conversation was so good that we decided we wanted to stick with it and share it with you anyway. So please enjoy the sounds of the thunderstorm in the background and this episode, and thank you for tuning in. So in today's episode, we are going to spend a little bit of time letting our listeners into a little bit of our life and kind of what makes our life unique in maybe one of the many ways that our life is unique. But something that we've done now for the last couple of years is spend about half of our life living on the road in this RV that, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see us in this surrounding right now. And this is something that we started doing because, well, there's been quite a few reasons, and we'll get into some of those. But as we've come into the stage of our lives where we have more freedom, we get to get out and explore and see some different places. So yeah, about half the year when it gets cold where we're from, way up in the north, we hit the road and we go somewhere warmer. And that's why, if you happen to hear in the background of this episode, we are not in the north where it would be snowing right now. We are in the middle of a thunderstorm in Texas. So this nomadic lifestyle, before we get into some of the whys and how we got here, what is it like for you being away from home and living on the road?
Oh my goodness, it's amazing. In a way that I'm gonna call myself the old me wouldn't have been able to flow with quite so easily. But now I have learned to embrace the uncertainties that come up with traveling, the excitement around the different areas we get to explore, and just a lot of the unknowns in a whole new way. And the work that I've done to get to where I'm at is what has made it possible to deal with the hiccups along the way and the things that affect our travel and anything that might come with it.
Yeah, and there are certainly the unknowns that come up, because, you know, for me, living this much of our lives in what I'll say is like an unsettled kind of lifestyle, because we're moving, we usually stay in one place for at least a month at a time, most of the time when we travel, but
yeah, not always though.
But every time that we have to move and, you know, hook this thing up and pull it somewhere else, there are a lot of variables that come up.
Yeah,
so
it's an adventure each time.
Yeah, and that's what we call it. It really is like our life is an adventure doing this. But one of the things that's been so fun for me in being more nomadic with how we live is it's challenged me to get better at also living in the uncertainty, but taking complete responsibility for making the plans and for dealing with the challenges and the problems as they come up. You know, we've had this thing break down and I've had to repair it in the parking lot of a golf course. And you know, we've had places we were going to go and park and live fall through the day before we were going to go, and I had to find a new place for us to live in less than 24 hours. And there's been a ton of challenges that this has caused me to need to learn how to handle. And that's been one of the big rewards for me, because it's made me be better at thinking on the fly and making solid decisions and going with them, and sometimes dealing with when those decisions go bad.
Yeah, and my side of that is taking a step back and saying and believing you've got this, and not asking questions of what are you doing and why, and asking you to justify what you're doing and explaining everything to me, but really leaning into the trust that you've got it and believing that everything will always work out. And I've watched myself lean into surrender so much more with this experience. And I've just witnessed your ability and confidence in a whole new way that is only made possible because of the traveling and all the uncertainties. I mean, let's be real, life is quite uncertain all the time, but we act like there's a lot of certainty, I think.
Well, especially the way that for us, when we're settled and, you know, back at our home and there for months at a time where we go over the summer, it's pretty easy to get into old routines, to fall into old patterns. It's a lot easier for us to essentially create safety by eliminating uncertainty.
Yeah, and I lived a lot of my life that way.
But what seems to happen every time we leave home and we go away, which usually always means going south.
Yeah.
We start driving south and we both just feel free. It's like hitting that open road. There's a freedom to it that's really, really powerful and fun.
Yes, there's a lot I can share there, but maybe I'll share it along the way when we're diving into other things.
So let's go back and talk about how we got here. The idea to do this was mine, and it was mine quite a few years ago.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. And for me, it came in part due to my own waking up when I realized that I'd lived my whole life trying to follow the rules and do everything the way that I thought was going to get me what I wanted. And then seeing all of the ways that I turned out to not be very happy with what I thought I was supposed to want. And eventually got to this place where I wanted to just do life my way. And I came across this idea, I don't remember where, of living full-time in an RV, and realized there's like 1 million people just in the United States alone who live full-time in their RVs. And in their fifth wheels and their campers and their motorhomes, and they just go from place to place and live wherever they park their house. And that to me just sounded like freedom. So I remember bringing that idea up in part because as your kids were getting older and we could see empty nesting we could see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So when we weren't able to have our own kids, which we talked about in a past episode, that was a big part of this for me. Like, if we're not going to have kids, I want to go live life our way. I want to do our thing and kind of live by our own rules. And so I put this vision out there to you quite a few years ago that someday when we were empty nesters, I wanted to do this. And at the time, I was still working in a corporate job. Now we do this full time, and this is a big part of what makes it possible for us, is that we get to live our life and do our work from wherever we happen to be.
Yeah, and I remember when you first shared it, I was like, what? Really? But of course, there was just this innate receptivity to you and what you would bring to me, just naturally. So, I sat with that, and it was this like someday. It felt like far out there. And I believe you talked about this even before we found out we couldn't have our own kids. I'm pretty sure we had talked about it. But then once that came along, and it was like, oh wow, still looking out into the future, it was like, oh, maybe that will happen. But it really opened my mind to expansion in a way that I hadn't before. I lived in the area where we live my whole life.
Yeah, you've never lived more than 20 miles from where you grew up.
Right, different places, but all the same area. And so for me, it was like, oh wow, like there is life outside of this area. But I became a young mom, and so I fell into that routine of like, this is just life now. Like, why would I uproot my kids just because? And then lots of other reasons why we just chose to stay where we were at the time. So for me, it was one of the first times where I feel like I started to take the cap off of the box of life is always going to be this way.
Yeah. Well, and that was a part of your programming, right?
Yeah.
Because not only have you never lived more than 20 miles from where you grew up, your parents still live right where they grew up. I mean, your dad still lives on the same property that he grew up on. He's never lived anywhere else. So there's a very deep roots in that area for your family.
Right.
So looking outside of that is just there being even the potential that you could go buy a house and live somewhere else really wasn't something you'd ever considered.
It was like the smallest thought, but I never allowed myself to actually want that for me. I didn't feel like I could.
So, we got to a point, and during COVID, we bought this camper when a lot of people were exploring different outdoor activities, and there was a lot of campers being bought and sold, and we bought this one. And then not too long after that was the first winter that we decided to get out of town. So I do want to get into how traveling and living on the road impacts our dom-sub dynamic too, but I want to hear from you before I share my perspective on this too. Just what's it like being unsettled? What's it like? Because I know some people that we talk to about the way that we live our life feel like they could never do this because it's so unsettled and everything is changing all the time. And so what are the practicalities like of living the way we live for you?
Well, when I'm going to talk about the old me. So if I would have tried to do this years ago, when I was operating in what I've called a survival mode, but operating under some just wounding and trauma from my past that affect all of my life, I clung to whatever certainty and structure that I could naturally, because that is what it seems to be the natural way that we start to make sense of this world at a very young age, as babies, little toddlers, as kids. And so going down this path and letting go of that emotional baggage from my past really has impacted me so positively. So, like, I'm talking getting out of the black and white thinking, getting out of thinking that life has to be a certain way in order for me to feel okay, and leaning into the excitement around novelty. Like, new things are fun. And so it's also finding the balance. Like you already shared, we stay in one area for a little while. That's a lot different than moving all the time, every few days or every week. That's a lot. And anybody who lives on the road would share probably that same perspective. We definitely wouldn't have this big a place if we wanted to move quite frequently. But the excitement of, well, we're exploring to find where else we want to live. And for the first time in my adult life, I actually have a freedom to go and experience life outside of home. And so there's a lot of excitement that's possible when I'm not clinging to certainty. And like I already shared, the trust that you've got this.
Some of the fun of this and the practicalities of this are that we've set up our ability to travel in a way where there is a certain amount of certainty to the way that we do this because of how we live our lives. And we bring a lot of normal life on the road with us.
Yes.
So we home cook every meal, and we're very aware and cognizant of the foods that we eat. I shouldn't say every meal, but
yeah, because we definitely go out on date night still.
Yeah, but we do prepare a lot of our own food, and we like to eat well. So being in a camper, it doesn't change what we do and how we eat and how we go about that part of our lives. So we still cook. We just had sourdough pizza for lunch that you make the crust, we make homemade sauce, we prepare all of our ingredients. Like, we make it all from scratch, and we do that whether we're at home or on the road.
Yep.
We bake our sourdough bread that we have for breakfast every morning. So we still cook and eat the same way when we're on the road, and that's a big part of bringing some semblance of certainty into the uncertainty that's always present in this kind of a lifestyle.
Yeah, and this is all of our own space too. And so therefore we have our own bed and our own pillow, and like, we get to put whatever we want to travel with in here. And so for me, it feels more like, for one, we both have said this, like, home is wherever you are. And so that just feels good in itself. But we get to create this space as our home and just move it somewhere else.
Yeah. And a part of the reason we do this besides that, we like the novelty, we like the fun, we like exploring and experiencing new places. Where we are right now, we just got here a couple days ago, and we'll be here for a couple of months, probably, unless we get bored with it and want to go somewhere else. But there, within 10 minutes of here, there are all kinds of great restaurants, barbecue places, cocktail joints. There's a winery right up the road. Like, there's lots of new stuff we can go do.
Yeah.
And I think, and I've always thought that it's important in life that we have novelty, like you mentioned, that we have new experiences. And we are coming up on 15 years since we started dating. So to continually inject novelty into this relationship with all of the different new things we get to experience living this way I think it's done something really special for our relationship, and just all the memories we're making, all of the new experiences we're having, and the things that we are, hopefully going to be someday sitting around in our 90s telling stories about all the different things that we got to do back in the 20s.
So one thing that I used to label myself as is a homebody.
Yeah.
And because what I didn't understand at the time is that was my safety. That was my safe place.
Well, you were just a homebody because you never went anywhere else.
No. So then, you came along and you brought this novelty excitement, and I just was like, whoa, that's more you than me. But wow, as I've let go of so much, I'm just going to say it that way, like I said, leaning into the excitement around that novelty has been incredible. And what I continuously come to realize is that experiences are what truly opens you to life. And it's the only way to actually know if something is for you or not. And so even just in that, applying that concept, I know you do this in the way you lead me, but I've experienced it, I've seen it, and it creates even more excitement in me to try something new. And that's so different than the way I operated before. Like, I can't even explain it. It feels so incredibly different.
Yeah, I really do wish at times that the old you could meet the new you.
Me too.
Because she would not believe if you had a time machine and you went back 10 or 15 years and said, hey, here's what my life is going to look like. The old you never would have believed it.
No.
So, we get to do this novelty thing. And like we kind of mentioned at the beginning, anything new is just full of opportunities for fear. Full of things you can be afraid of, because it is unknown all the time. We just got to this place a couple days ago. We drove 1,200 miles across the country in 2 days to get here. We'd never been here. We'd only seen pictures on the internet and read reviews on Google about what this place was like. And we decide 3 months in advance that we're going to drive 1,200 miles and make this place our home for a month or two. You never know what you're really getting when you get here.
Yeah, so let's share a little bit about that process on how we choose our places.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because like everything that we do, our dom-sub dynamic is incorporated into the way that we live our life. It's not just something that we play with, it's who we are.
Yeah.
So when we are figuring out where we want to go, I lean on you for help.
Yeah. So what I like to do in this process is we kind of arrive through conversation at the area we're going to go to. So this time it was a different part of Texas. And so I grab my map, my Apple Maps, and I start looking at all the different RV parks that I can find in the area. And I go to the websites that have them. Some do, some don't. The ones that don't really don't stand a chance. So I go to the websites and I start looking at the things that are important to us. And I get a feel in response to what I'm experiencing. And so those who don't have a great website, again, really aren't going to be considered by me because I don't have a lot to go off of. And I'm going with this feel. Mm-hmm. And so anything that feels good to me, I put on a list with a link to the page. And I do that a few different times. I do it for as long as feels good to me. And if all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed, then I turn it off and I'm done. And then I come back when it feels good to me to be open in that way. And so I create my list and then you take it from there.
Yeah, so you kind of do the feeling out of different places. Where does it feel good? What looks pretty? Because we know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
We know it's important to us. We want to be places that are pretty. We want to be in places where we have some space, where we're not just cramped in. We look for sites, even in these RV parks, where we can have some space and some privacy. Mm-hmm. Because let's be real, we make some noise in this camper.
Yes, I do.
So, a little bit of space is nice for that purpose and for others, for our work too.
I think these walls are pretty hollow.
They're very thin. So, you find places that just fit the general vibe of the things that we have learned that we like and that we need and that we value in our experiences. Back to your statement before about life being learned about through experience. You can think like we thought we knew what we liked in campgrounds until we started staying in them, and then we knew what we really liked and wanted and didn't want.
Right. The list of priorities kind of shifted a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. So you find a bunch of places for me to look at and choose from. And then generally I look at reviews of those places. I do all of the deciding from there. I figure out which places will actually work for us, like practically, based on location, based on availability, based on travel plans. And then I look at reviews and I kind of prioritize which ones look the best. And then I call and I talk to the people, because the people that run these places matter, and that's an important piece. So I get a feel for the people that work there and for what the place is like. And then I do all the piecing together of where are we going to stay, when are we going to check in, when does that mean we need to leave, what are all of the travel plans in between. I do all of the deciding based on, and I guess informed by the input that you give me. So you just bring me a whole bunch of information that's been somewhat narrowed down into the specifications that I've given you and that we've learned together. And then I do the decision making, the where, the when, the why, the how, the what. And you have gotten very good at essentially handing that over to me, and then I'll tell you that we leave on January 19th at 5 a.m. I need to have you packed, ready to go, and what you are responsible for in getting us ready to leave when we're leaving home. And then we get in the car and go, and you just follow me in that.
And you tell me where we're going before that.
I do.
And so it's always fun for me to be like, ooh, which one did he choose? Because by that point, like when you told me about this place, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. But by the name of it, no, had no idea. And so it's fun to go back to the website and look at it together and see what's happening, where are we going? And start imagining what life is going to be like when we're there.
Yeah. But then still we drive all the way across the country and get here, and we've gotten to places where it's not what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah.
Just the site was not accurate with our map.
Yeah. Because these places are, they're all designed by people and within the constraints of the land that they have and the way that they've laid everything out. So, we learned last year that we have to pay attention to where the dumpsters are, because we ended up with a dumpster for the whole campground in our backyard.
It wasn't supposed to be, though, remember? I'm saying the map was not accurate where our site was.
Right.
And they had the dumpsters in a different location. They were temporarily moved, basically in our backyard. So that was a whole fiasco of all the construction going on that we were never told about. And so, yeah. And I love surrendering all of the figuring it out to you. And being able to truly, it's almost not care. Because it's like, you got it, always. And also recognizing, let's use last year as the example. We both looked at that map. We were going between two different parks, and we chose that one. And we get there initially and we see our site and we're like, this is not accurate. And there was a part of me that wanted to be like, we should have chose the other park. Like, that would have been better. Making the assumption that, of course, it would have been better.
Yeah.
Instead of, and you don't know that even, but that's where the mind wants to jump to when it didn't go as planned or as the assumptions that I had made. So, of course, we made the best of it, which is the only thing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right in that, because it's very natural that I think we can assume when something didn't go well that the other choice would have been better.
Yeah.
When in reality, the other one could have been even worse.
Right.
Than what we ended up with.
So, for example, we were supposed to be 2 spots over here. And so you called to confirm our reservation, and they're like, oh, wait, someone else is in your spot. And so then we get moved 2 sites over. And initially I'm like, what? But then I'm like, you know what? Life always works out. There is an opportunity here. And we get here, and immediately I'm like, the way our windows look out, this is better. Like, it worked out.
Yeah, it's bigger. Everything about it is better than it would have been.
Yeah.
If things hadn't gotten thrown for a loop.
Right. So learning to go with the flow and not be so attached to what we wanted or thought we wanted in that site, I can't tell you how different that feels in my whole system.
One of the things that's really important about learning to live in embodied submission is learning to live with uncertainty.
Absolutely.
Because being submissive is being out of control. So this lifestyle of traveling, of moving, of being in different places, of having all of this uncertainty in our lives has really been a beautiful practice ground for you in that letting go that has mapped over into how your submission in relation to me plays out.
Absolutely. it comes down to being open to the experiences of life and seeing them always as an opportunity to open more to the possibility of what can be. And I've come so far in that. I know how I used to show up.
Yeah, again, old Dawn wouldn't recognize new Dawn.
No. That feels really good.
So what are some of the ways that your life living in the camper is different than your life living at home? What does it change?
So for one, space. Going back and forth, I definitely recognize that spaciousness is a thing for me. And I definitely couldn't live in this thing in a cold climate. It's too small. So since it's smaller, I also have less of my stuff. So you get really good at learning by experience about with all these different traveling, like what do I want and need? What can I live without? What can I live without? And so one important thing for me is being able to be outside whenever the weather is nice, because there is a huge difference than sitting on the love seat reading a book than sitting outside in the sunshine. It just feels dramatically different to me. And so that, like, when we were in here before Christmas and we went back home, going back home, it was like, oh my gosh, because the weather had gotten colder and we were just more limited. I was spending a lot of time in here. And I love being outside for walks. I love sitting outside in the sunshine. I love being by water whenever I possibly can. And I love doing workouts outside, whatever that may be. And so that's probably the biggest difference for me. Everything else I can manage pretty well with. Like you said, we cook basically the same. We have less space, so we don't have as many options all at the same time, but we have a good amount for a camper. This was definitely a good choice.
Yeah, we are, because this thing hooks up behind our truck and we have limitations on how much weight we can have in here. We have limitations on the space. So it is like a forced simplification. It
is, which is, has its pros and its cons.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a lot of ways, I love it. I get to do yoga right here in our living room, or I can do it outside. We bring our Concept 2 rower with, and we set that up outside. And so I love being able to do that. So that's the same. And then, the other bands and dumbbells and stuff for workouts.
Yeah. For me, being the responsible one, being the one in this relationship and in our lives where I am leading us in everything in all ways. We've already talked about some of the ways that there's more, like there are new decisions to make. There are a lot more moving pieces in a life that isn't just settled and stable and in the same place. But on the flip side of that, there is less stuff. There's less clutter. You don't have room to have a lot of things to clutter up your space. There's just this forced simplification or this forced minimalist lifestyle that you don't really have any choice but to live it. And as much as going home does give us a lot more space, I mean, we're in roughly 250 square feet in this thing. and home is about 2,000 square feet. So going home, there is a lot more space. There's also a lot more stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've learned by living this lifestyle is that I don't really need most of that stuff. That all of that space gets filled up with all of that stuff that just sits there for half of the year, and it's nice to know that we have it. But I don't ever think about it. It's pretty rare that I'm here wishing that I had like a thing that's back home, because I don't need it when I'm here.
Yeah, and we had also downsized before that. But so, on our first travels, I took your mentality in that a little too far. Like, so you go down south, the weather doesn't automatically mean summertime. So So
when you're from Minnesota, where we are, this time of year, it can easily be 10, 20 below zero, mm-hmm. sometimes colder than that. There can be lots of snow, lots of ice, and the only way that you dress is with as much on as possible.
Yes.
So the reason you say that is because it seems like when you have lived your whole life up in the tundra, and now we're going to go 1,200 miles south, and we're going to live this whole winter down in Texas, where, boy, it must just be like the Caribbean down there. It must be like Hawaii. It's just 85 and sunny. Summertime all year long is kind of what it feels like, because comparatively it's pretty damn nice, but it's still not.
Right. So of course we look at the weather and what the forecast is. I mean, but last year we get down here and we come into an ice storm, and it's below freezing for the first week. And I was like, I didn't quite prepare for that cold. I left my heaviest winter jacket back home. And so, like, this year, I wasn't willing to sacrifice my options. I left my biggest winter jacket back home, but I still brought a longer one, a thinner, longer one with, and the hat and the gloves. But then, I brought all my swimsuits. I brought plenty of stilettos. I brought plenty of sandals. Like, I wasn't willing to go that far because we do have the space for it. And so, again, I learned by experience on, I don't want to shrink my options. That doesn't feel good to me. I've really, in the last year, worked on expansion and letting myself be big and take up space, if you will, in the world, which means taking up space with my things. And it feels good to me now because I didn't let myself always do that before.
Well, you are certainly taking up the floor of the closet with all of your shoes on this trip.
Not even all of it. Maybe if I brought all of them. I don't even have that many shoes. I want more. Always room for more. Different for different outfits. That's really fun. I haven't let myself want that before.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on these realizations around letting yourself want.
Good idea.
So another thing about the reason why we do this, it is fun to live on the road. It's exciting, it's interesting, it's new, it's novelty, it's all that stuff. But we also do want to settle at some point.
Yeah.
And when I say settle, I don't mean settle. I mean, we want to find a new home. Mm-hmm. And if you've lived in the same place your whole life, you've really lived in the same place. I've lived in the same state, in different places in it. But if you've never lived anywhere else, it's hard to figure out and know really where you would want to live.
Right.
If you are considering completely different parts of the country.
There are certain aspects of something different that naturally feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Until maybe you experience that different.
And that's why this is really fun and helpful in us figuring out where we want to make our new home. And one of the things I really love about doing this with you is we pick places that we want to go, but we also pick places that we might want to consider as potential future homes.
Right.
So then we get to set up there. We get to do our work. We record this podcast. We work with our coaching clients. We do everything the same here as when we're at home. But then on our weekends and on our days where we don't have other stuff going on, we go out and explore. Because when you stay somewhere for a month or 2 months, you really do have to integrate yourself with that community for a little while. I need to find a barber. And we go grocery shopping. And we go out to the restaurants and you meet some local people. So you don't get to do that if you just go somewhere for a weekend or go somewhere on a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a part of this whole process for us is we are figuring out, we're going to be able to figure out where we want to call home based on really knowing what it's like to be there.
Yeah. A lot of people move because of jobs and they don't necessarily get to choose the city. Maybe they have some sort of choice in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you always have a choice to work for a company or not. But a lot of people move that way.
Right. Yeah, and when the only limitations we have are good internet access for our business, and we can basically be wherever we can make home be wherever we want it to be.
Right.
So we are, at the same time as we're traveling and we're doing the nomadic thing, we're also getting to learn where we might want to make home.
Yeah, and when we're doing that, I'm in tune with my body and what my experience is of the area as well. And it is really eye-opening on what that can be in the felt experience. Like, we spent 2 months at least in Eastern Tennessee before Christmas last fall, and in my mind it was like, oh wow, like I literally felt my heart being drawn down there, and so I was really excited. My role is not making meaning out of what that feeling is, but then being down there and experiencing the mountains and the fall colors, I mean, it was gorgeous, and it
really beautiful scenery.
Yeah, and it was like, oh wow, like this is amazing. But then by the end of that trip, something shifted in my system, and it's like, this is enough, at least for right now. I'm ready to leave here. And, again, that's information for you on making decisions.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting little nugget, I guess, in how dominance and submission works in the practicalities of life. Because submission, in the way that you live it and in the way that we teach it, really is about being open. It's about being expansive. It's about being receptive. And it's not just about doing what you're told.
No. I'm sorry. If that's all it was, I would get really bored.
Well, right, because I would probably get bored with you, because if that's all you did was sit there and wait for me to tell you what to do, like, our dog is more exciting than that. Because
I think the look on my face is like saying everything. I'm just like cringing. Like, no.
Like, I want you to be vibrant and alive and full of energy and life and arrows. And so you being my submissive doesn't mean shrinking you. It doesn't mean limiting you. It really does mean setting you free and letting you be more expansive. And a part of that process is connecting with what it means to be receptive.
Absolutely.
And living as a receptive force beyond just me. This thunderstorm is really starting to pick up outside. I wonder how much of this will be coming through our microphones.
The rain pelting the roof.
Yeah, we are in this very narrow walled camper in a thunderstorm right now, so wish us well. When you expand and let down your walls to be able to be receptive to me, you are also letting down your walls to be receptive to life beyond me.
Absolutely.
And the experience of that, when it comes to going to new places, that receptivity that you live gives you a feel for the places that we go. It gives you a feel for the things that we do. And I'm not just bossing you around. I am leading us informed by what it is that you're feeling. Because what you are very, very good at is knowing what it feels like to be you in whatever situation that you're in. What I'm really good at is figuring out what the hell to do about it.
Yeah. Yes, you are.
So we spent some time in a city in the South last fall, and you disliked it so much that you actually snapped at me, which you never, ever, ever do.
Well, now I have to give some context.
Context away.
Quick synopsis here. Is that the right word? Story. We'll go with. Drive into the city. We park the truck and we get out and walk around. And the look was like, this is interesting. Like the downtown area, I'm like, what is here? It just looks like it's filled with businesses. There's no action on a Saturday afternoon. Mm-hmm. And so we walk around, and we were going to go back to the truck, and out of the corner of my eye, I'm like, oh, that looks better over there. So I'm like, can we go over there? And you're like, sure, let's go this way. So we go this way. Looks a little better, but that's it. Felt experience was the same. So we get back in the truck. We drive to a different area of the city, closer to the water. We get out. It was just like...
The whole city felt dead.
Yeah, dead. And I just felt almost ill in my body. I was feeling this pain coming up in my chest. And so I'm sharing all of this with you, and you're kind of agreeing, like, yeah, this just doesn't feel right. So then we get back in the truck and we drive to a different area of the city, and it was like worse. And so we get out, we shop at one place and get back in the truck, and oh yeah, we stopped to grab a bite to eat even. So we're in there long enough, and we get back in the truck, and by that point, I was not really understanding. Well, I wasn't understanding what was going on inside my body, but it was starting to scream at me, like. And you were trying to ask me some questions on what kind of place I wanted to enjoy for dinner. And I was just like, I don't know. I need to get the fuck out of this city right now. Yeah. And I felt I lost my shit.
Except she wasn't giggling like she did now. She was like almost angry.
I was. And it felt like bad energy in my body. It was so bizarre. I've never had an experience like that. And so you look at me and you say something like, all right, I need you to sit right here. I need you just to take some deep breaths, and I'm going to figure out where we're going. I'm getting you out of this city right away. And I did that. He figured it out very quickly, and out of the city we went. And it was definitely better. It definitely stirred me up, and just, yeah, it was just uncomfortable. Very.
Yeah, so this process of going deeper into submission has opened you up to, in a way that you feel the energy of things. You
Yep.
receive the energy of people, of places, of experiences.
Yep.
And it's up to me to make decisions for us, but I'm always informed by those things that you feel. And this goes across any part of life. You feel, you express to me, and all of that it informs me as to your experience. Now, if I said we're moving to that city, you would go there with me, and we would move there, and we would live there. But I trust and I know that you would follow me. But I even saw in your eyes, like, please don't. Because this is the other part of my role as your dominant and as your leader, is to make decisions that are informed by your feeling. And what you're connected to in that receptivity with those walls down and your ability to feel things is something that I don't have. It's an experience that I don't have. So your ability to feel those things and to share them with me gives me information that I can't get without you being the one to give it to me. And it's really, really valuable for me. And it helps me lead you in a way that is not just telling you what to do, but it really is informed by what is good for you and what's bad for you, what's right and what's wrong. And I can almost always find win-wins. This isn't like you just telling me what to do or using your emotions to get your way. This is about you feeling what you feel and me being willing to receive that and calibrate my leadership according to what's good for you. Because if you feel that way, there's a reason you feel that way. There's something about that place that's not right for you. And if it's not right for you, it's not right for me either.
Right. Like, we had set the intention that day of, we're going to go into this city to see if this is a city we wanted to live near.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very important to share, because I forgot that piece, because that's what brought up that experience for me. We had been in the city at least twice before, and I didn't have that experience. But when we're setting this intention out to the universe, like, hey, we might want to live here, I had the emotional experience like, no, this is not for you. At least that's what you arrived at making the meaning out of, because my job, my role is sharing my experience with you and not getting attached to figuring it out. Making the stories and the meaning out of what my emotional experience is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you get to do.
Right. So you get to be in that receptive state and in that feeling state, which sometimes gives you those really like gross feelings, but also on the other side of that same receptivity gives you the glowing, exciting, open feelings of things and places and people and experiences that are right for you. You feel a very different experience when something is right and when something is not.
Right.
And all of that just helps me connect to a deeper truth about things. And you not having to be the one to decide what to do with it helps you stay out of your head and just share with me what you feel.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean that I end up in my head either. This is the process of us both staying in our bodies and staying present in our experience. Because just as much as you trust me that I've got it, and I know that, so I can confidently make decisions that I don't need to explain to you. I know if I say this, it's that.
Right.
But you also know that if you feel something, that I'm going to take it into account. It is absolutely going to be heard and received and highly valued.
Right.
So we have a mutual, again, there's this mutual surrender to each other and openness to each other that helps us live as one unit, where we both get to live in our strengths.
And like everything that you just shared also for me has brought a new excitement around what will this experience be. So let's say we're going into this city on Friday night, we're going to go get a feel for what it's like. My desire for that novelty feels so much bigger because I get to tune into what this experience truly gets to be and show up with an open receptivity. And again, that wasn't how I lived before, but I get to live in that now, and it just feels so incredible.
So for the people listening, watching, we will continue to share our journeys and our travels. We share a lot of this stuff through our Instagram stories about like what we're doing and where we're going. If people are interested in following along with our crazy fun life. So we are at _infinite devotion on Instagram if you want to follow us there. That'll be linked in the show notes for this and every other show. But again, we've put this solicitation out there before. If you live somewhere that you really love and a place that you think we might enjoy, it needs to be somewhere that we can be outside to some extent as much of the year as possible, if not all year.
Let's clarify that. You can be outside in the cold. We don't want to live in the northern United States or where your winters are long with like 30s below and below there.
Yeah, so we're definitely talking in the southern half of the United States, and somewhere that has some nice peace and quiet, but also close enough to some culture. We like good restaurants, and we like good cocktails and fun people.
Yeah. Or just share what you love about where you live, because perspective is always important. So
yeah, absolutely.
We love to hear from you guys.
And so we will keep on traveling, and we will keep everyone up to date with all the different places that we go and the things that we do. And it really is a joy and a blessing for us to be able to share our lives with you in this way. So thank you for being with us on our journey.
Yes, thank you so much.
And until next time, thanks for listening.